Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. A few moments ago, I was just scrolling through my YouTube and noticed Vinger Satanis had put out a video saying, "Does D&D need a insurrection?" And like I didn't like I said, I just was scrolling past it and noticed the title. I did not watch the video, so I don't know exactly what he had to say in it. But just kind of just riffing on just my own general thoughts on that concept. It's too late, guys. The whole culture war thing is actually too late. The battle was lost 80 years ago, roughly. Do you care about mental health? Do you care about your own mental health, the mental health of others, the concept of public mental health? Because that was the tip of the sword that was used for the whole cultural infiltration, the dawn of the woke, all that kind of stuff, many years ago by actual subversive communist infiltrators, the real ones, not the ones we have nowadays, but the people from, who are doing this shit almost a century ago now and starting these trends in society. It has nothing to do with, agitating the working class to get them to like want to abandon capitalism. That's not how you start the process. It really has nothing to do with agitating racial tensions between different groups of people. The whole tip of the sword to get people to start doubting their own civilization and their own society and culture was to get people to start worrying about mental health, the mental health of children, the mental health of society, so on and so forth. And I feel like that has become now so embedded in our culture as being something to like value and worry about. Like, you would sound like some sort of inhuman monster if you were to propose that everyone just needs to just quit worrying about their mental health and go about their days like they used to. Um, and like I said, because of that, the battle is already lost. The thing is that like communism can't manifest because it's always going to end up becoming a military dictatorship. The entire process of the revolution militarizes the leadership, and then once they're in power and they're still stuck on a planet with a bunch of other countries and a bunch of other militaries and a bunch of other economies, they have to maintain a military poise. And so you, instead of getting an actual communist country, you just get these military juntas that call themselves communist countries. Um, on paper, though, like most governments on paper and just pure raw theory, they sound all right. They sound like they're going to work, but the actual implementation is always a problem. I feel philosophically speaking that it's always kind of bothered me that the democratic countries and the communist countries disliked each other so much at all because they're both basically doing the exact same thing. Maybe that's part of why they don't like each other, because they're just going at slightly different angles. But both are basically an attempt to empower the populace over a small core of aristocrats. Um, here in the West, we've kind of seemingly forgot about this. Most of what's going on in this culture war it's all trickling down from decisions made from leadership at the top. And if there's one general observation one can make looking back on history, is that the noble caste does not really care what color skin their peasants have. As long as the peasants keep peasanting, that's all they really give a shit about. They've encouraged lifestyles over the last century that have caused changes in how people go about doing their business over the course of their lives that have, caused a collapse, a back collapse of population growth, which means they need to encourage, new populations to come in to replace this, because that same business culture that has encouraged us to not having as many kids and all that kind of stuff is also dependent upon eternal growth in order for them to be able to be successful. So they have no way to collapse their own sphere of influence to continue to mirror their own population that they've caused to collapse. Uh, it's really like nothing about like having taken any particular sides, or they want to see population X do better than population Y. As I said, the nobility doesn't really care about what the people at the bottom are doing. It's convenient to them that we're all bitching at each other and stuff and fighting fights over Smurfs and He-Man action figures and Star Wars movies and D and fucking D, and whether or not dwarves can be black and beardless and just um, you know look, before watching this, I saw, like I said, some little video title from Venger saying, does D&D need an insurrection? There's no way to fight an insurrection in D&D. There's no way for the people at the bottom agitating to seize control of D&D themselves. It's a branded, owned intellectual property. There's no way to take that unless you just raise an awful lot of money and buy it your damn self. And generally, even going back to like the Last Jedi stuff, despite all the agitation about like, the companies are insulting us and ruining our stuff, it's like, well, instead of paying all these stupid $4.99 super chats to people like Geeks and Gamers and Doomcock and stuff like that, well, maybe we should all pull our money together and just buy Star Trek or buy Star Wars. But of course, no, that's not what's going on. There's no attempt to create some sort of coalition of Disney Plus stock ownership to try to create some sort of wedge to force them to have to comply to what one segment of the audience wants. No one's proposing any of that kind of shit. And insurrection there is no insurrection to be had with D&D. The only way to win a fight against the people who have taken over Dungeons and Dragons and are doing the things of D&D that you don't like, which I'm not even sure how much they're actually doing to the game itself that's bad. I feel most of this is all just downwind of a bunch of social media posturing from the people who play and write these games. But either way, the only way to defeat them is to make D&D out to be a childish joke. The only way we can win D&D as a culture war thing is to make D&D unattractive to play. We have to ridicule it. We have to keep hammering in what a childish, crappy old game this is, and encourage people who are into role-playing games to play a different game. I don't even really feel that using the OSR is really a viable alternative, because the OSR is still Dungeons and Dragons. It's based on Dungeons and Dragons rules. It's all trying to recapture some long-lost Dungeons and Dragons flavor. And even though there's so many OSR products out there now that, yes, it's not likely for Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro to try to pull the open game license and try to force all those products off the market. Just the sheer level of suits and countersuits that could arise from that is the kind of legal trouble they're probably not interested in having to wade into at this point. They've effectively made the D20 system a public domain thing, as long as you continue to put your little disclaimer on there. But that still means it's living in D&D's shadow. In order to make D&D uncool, the entire thing has to be portrayed as uncool. So, and I don't really see any of y'all actually doing that. Maybe one or two of you watching this right now might be nodding your heads going, yeah, I get it. But most of you are like, but I love D&D, and the OSR is the greatest thing ever. How dare you insult it? Bad man, unsubscribe. And that's why you're going to continue to lose. Your childish attachment to these brands just serves them. They don't care if you don't like it. You're still spending money on it. You're still giving them heat energy. You're still spreading their name. You're still agitating the computer algorithms that really don't actually care about our tones or what we're saying, whether or not it's positive or negative. They just are able to report back to their masters that this many people online are talking about product X. And then they can show that to their investors and create this grand illusion of how popular this thing is, even if half the people actually talking about it hate it. I don't really see anything happening from this. Everyone's full of shit. If this country, or this is civilization, it goes beyond just America. Like the entire civilization that's currently based around English-speaking internet use, if it was really going to have any sort of like big violent divide, that would have happened 2 years ago now, and that moment passed. That steam got let out of the valve. The pressure was taken down. And so when I hear, people like, oh, you're gonna take the gloves off, I'm like, what, online? That's an impotent statement. No one's ever gonna come out and give everyone the green light to go ahead and attack the other side openly. This is always just kind of like just some shadow theater, keeping us all worried about each other instead of worried about the people at the top who are taking advantage of everything and, trying to socially engineer some sort of science fiction vision of the future they've convinced themselves out of some sort of guilt reflex that they're responsible for building us towards. Every time I hear people say stuff like, it's the year so-and-so, and so of course we should be doing this, that's a result of science fiction and culture. That's stuff like, oh, well, Star Trek told us that by the year 20 whatever, we would have this in society. And so now that we're at that year, this thing from the 60s told us we should have this thing. And so now we've failed somehow by not having done the thing that a science fiction thing from 40 years earlier had predicted. There is no upward forward trend. There is no forward motion. There is no left. There is no right. These are all just made up terms. We're all basically wandering blindly through a gray mist. And all this stuff is just artifice we've created to create some sort of sensation that we're actually navigating as we move along. But all of it's just shit we've made up. So, I don't know, what's the point here? There is no point here. You are not going to do anything to actually hurt Dungeons and Dragons. In the end, all we can really do is just sit and wait and hope that they do it themselves. The fact that we got a movie and the cartoon series that just came out, and apparently they've announced another live-action series, and that even though despite the fact that the runner of Wizards of the Coast has now been promoted to head of Hasbro, there's still talk about Wizards being sold and all that kind of stuff. I feel that if we just are patient, the guys there at Wizards of the Coast will do our work for us if they aren't really already doing it. I mean, it's already real close to just being a joke to people. It's just, you gotta abandon it, guys. There's tons of other games. Find something else. Otherwise, quit bitching. If you're not willing to take that kind of ultimate step of just like cutting yourself off from Dungeons and Dragons entirely, not just 5th edition, but all editions, you have to just completely make the games within gaming culture, we have to just make it seem like you're going to be some sort of pathetic social pariah if you play it. That's the only way to win against it. There's nothing you're ever going to be able to do from within to retake over D&D culture and seize the I6 of production. I don't know. Anyway, I guess leave comments, although, I don't know, after this video, I probably am not going to terribly enjoy them. Hit like and subscribe, stay waspinated, and do the things.